In this tutorial, we're going to be working on making a model of the Earth. In the past, I've done this as like a globe that sits on a desktop, but in this one, we're actually going to do just the globe part and the things to make it look fairly realistic, and then we're going to also see if we can create a star field using features in Blender. We might resort to using some textures or photos for that too as well, but we'll see where we go. So in Blender, we're going to go ahead and delete our default cube. I'm also going to change this to Cycles Render because we're going to be using that. We're going to do Shift S just to make sure that the cursor is in the center, so cursor to center, Shift A, and I'm going to add a UV sphere. Over in the Tools menu, before I do any moving of the sphere, I want to make sure that I have adjusted my UV sphere the way I want, to make sure all the settings look good on that. And so I'm going to change the number of segments on this to let's go ahead and do 256, just a lot, and you can see it nice and striped here like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the number of rings to, let's try 128 for starters. I have a fairly high resolution sphere here now. The sections there are fairly square too as well. That'll work just fine for me. I don't have to do a lot of subsurface with that. For the size, we're going to expand the radius out to, let's go ahead and do 5 and see what that looks like. Okay, that looks nice. And if I wanted to, I could go and make it more like the grid size there. Not too worried about it just at the moment. And I'm going to go ahead and, with all those settings set, I'm going to go ahead and tab in here just to see what it looks like. Good. Okay, there's our globe. Now, in my Tools menu, I'm going to go down until I get to, in the Edit section, I'm going to click on Smooth Shading. And this is probably smooth enough that I don't even have to add a subdivision modifier onto it. We could though anyway, and we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to my modifiers. I'm going to add a subdivision surface, although for where it says view, I'm going to go ahead and turn that down to 0, which means that I won't see it doing anything there, only when I render it, and which will add to some of the render time, but that won't be too bad. Okay, now for this model, what I want to do is make it so that we can map a texture of the Earth on it. And for this particular assignment, I'm going to give you guys some images to use. Those will be stored both on the server, and I'll also make a Google Classroom file that has those on it too as well. And we're going to apply those as texture maps here. So I'm going to go down to my outliner where it says sphere here. I'm going to go ahead and rename this Earth. And then I'll get rid of that lamp later, so I don't need to worry about it right now. But I'm going to change my outliner to 3D view, and then I'm going to change this to rendered. So I'm going to go over here. I could do Shift Z as well, and there we go. Got our globe. And I'm just looking at it from the front at the moment. Rotate it a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to tab into my globe. I have everything selected already. A to deselect, A to reselect if you need to. And it never hurts to double check to make sure you have everything selected. I'm going to go to where it says shading over here on my Tools menu. And I'm going to go ahead and click on where it says unwrap. And then I'm going to use sphere projection. Click that, there we go. And basically that'll map all the UVs so that they are like a sphere. There we go. So I'm going to start to create our material for this. And I'm going to go over to my materials section here. I'm going to say new, and we're going to call this material earth. And I can tab out here as well. I can also select material so I can see what it does. I don't see the lighting per se on that one, but I have it in render view over there, which works just fine. And we're going to be adding some various shaders here. So we're going to go ahead and change this. We don't need to worry about the timeline. So I'm just going to move that up a little bit. And we're going to change this from timeline to node editor. There we go, node editor. Okay, so right now we're set on diffuse, which is fine for our needs. We'll change some other things there a little bit later as we get more and more complex. So to start off with, we want to use a texture map, and so I'm going to do Shift A, and we're going to go ahead to where it says input. And since I am using a texture map, I want to do coordinates, so I'm going to put that in there. And then I'm going to do Shift A again, and I'm going to go to where it says texture, one of these, on this menu, texture, and I'm going to go and do image texture. Click, and I'm going to say where it says UV, I'm going to add into the vector there, and then where it says color, I'm going to put that in as color here. And since I have no texture at the moment, the default color it does is purple for that. And where it says open, I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go to where I have my images stored. So I found my images. I actually have 5 of them, and the one that I want right now is where it says, and actually, since I'm not sure what it's called specifically, I'm going to switch to display mode, albedo. So I'm going to click on this one and say open. And here I have the globe all around like so. And that actually doesn't look too terrible. Okay. I got UV there, coming there. Let's change this from, oh, actually that works good. And since I already have the UVs on there, we definitely want where it says flat. Okay. And we can worry about lining up the top of the picture later on this one. And use my other one, use generated. Let's see what that looks like. And then let's do sphere. Actually, I like that much better. Okay, so we got that set up the way we want. I went ahead with generated instead, and I set the setting there to sphere so that I could get kind of it the way that I wanted. We can ignore that line that just shows where that texture line's back up again, and it all seems to work out pretty good. So that's just the first step for this one, and then we're going to get a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to give some extra space here, and yeah. Okay, So I'm going to need more image textures, and since I have all those different ones that I did before, I'm going to do Shift D, take this one, and just move it up. And I can use my middle mouse button to drag this around. I'm going to put this one towards the top. I'm going to do Shift D again, and I'm going to put this over here, hit G to move, there we go. And I'm going to put this one down here. And we need, I think in this one I just use 4 textures, and we'll go over those in just a moment. So Shift D. The nice thing of doing this way is that our settings for those are all pretty much the same. And right now they're all the same image. We're going to change those in just a moment. I'm going to take the generated and put those down for each of these vectors. Even though I'm not to those yet and might not work on them until the next video segment, at least I get started with that. And I'm going to take this one up here on top, and we're going to put in the ocean image. So I'm going to click, zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to click on the little folder, and I'm going to put in my ocean mask, open image. I should also say on this that your folder that you put the images in is going to be important. It's kind of nice to put your file in that same folder, because if you move any of them around, then you're going to want to be able to get back to it with all the things. So for instance, if you save your Blender file and you open it up at home but you didn't have the images in the same folder, you didn't pack all those up as one piece, you'll not see any of your textures. And same if you move it to another computer. So having the same folder would be a good idea. I might do a separate video on that just so that you know how to do that. Okay, so my next one I'm going to do is going to be the bump mapping, and so I'm going to choose this one down here. I'm going to go and click on bump, open image, and then this last one is where it's going to get fairly complicated. I'm going to click on it, folder icon, and I'm going to click Night Lights Modified. There we go. Okay, so I have my 4 textures I'm going to end up incorporating together on this, and we're going to start to build this out a little bit more. Okay, so for my ocean, what I want to do is I'm going to try and get my surface image, and then also an image for the ocean where it's a little bit more reflective on the water than the land. And so I want to get it so that I can see that a little bit better by itself. So I'm going to add in some mixed shaders. I'm going to do Shift A, and I'm going to go to where it says shader, and then mixed. There we go. And I'm going to just plug that in right here. So once you have that mix shader in, we're going to go ahead and do Shift A again. We're going to go down to where it says color. We're going to choose invert, and I'm going to put that right here. And we're going to take the color from there to this one, invert. I'm going to leave factor at 1. I'm going to bring that down to my factor for the mix shaders. So this one's actually not going to appear as a color. Okay, and right now you can see that all the oceans just kind of turn black there. Okay, that's because it's going off of what this map provided. So for instance, if I had this connected directly to factor, then my land goes darker and I can see the ocean. And so that's why we have this invert, and we want it inverted all the way. I just plugged that into the wrong one. There we go. And so I'm taking that and I'm using it as the factor for this. If I slide that, I can actually get various levels of that